Okay, Glenn Greenwald is an interesting character with whom I've interacted only once. At one point, I tweeted something about class reductionism, and Glenn Greenwald quote tweeted me saying that this is a nonsense thing, it's not real. And then there were people who responded to him saying, yes, it is, and you're the one doing it. I feel like every time I learn something new about Glenn Greenwald, it completely recontextualizes my opinion of him, which is really, really, really interesting. The As I understand it, Glenn Greenwald used to be a really, really dedicated investigative journalist. You know, a person who would have been exceptionally critical of the pseudo populism represented by independent media figures, people like Tucker Carlson or people like The Rising, for example. But I don't understand what he's going for anymore, to be honest. There are some elements, especially with regards to foreign policy, where it seems like he has a really, really, really like good handle on things, but it also seems like he's lost vision locally, and he's bought into this idea that, I mean, for lack of a better term, he's bought into the populism whirlpool, bought into the idea that anti-establishmentarianism, or anyone who even vaguely signals it, is good, no matter what that anti-establishmentarianism actually leads to, you know? I've talked about this before. The right and the left have nothing to do with one another when it comes to being anti-establishment. It's not enough to be anti the system. You have to be anti the system for a good reason. Why is somebody like, say, Tucker Carlson anti the system? Too many brown people. What are you going to do? Too many swarthy types, you know? But that is a system. Our immigration system is something that people can criticize, but if a left and a right-leaning person both said, I have concerns about our immigration system, what do you think the differences would be? It's not enough to be aligned on the existence of a problem. You must be aligned on your potential response to it. And now I see this weird, I don't even know if it's Bernie or bust sentiment, but from Glenn Greenwald, this is just from a little while ago, a week ago, responding to Michael Tracy, who I've had on my show and who I have an unfathomably low level of respect for because he signals himself to be a progressive, but is really just anti-woke and does everything possible to assist Republican Party talking points. Even with Trump gone, Dems and their media outlets are going to keep centering/inflating the threat of fascism and right-wing domestic terrorism because that's what keeps them everyone in line behind the Dems. We can't fight neoliberalism or imperialism until we've vanquished fascism. The Democratic Party and its media outlets, MSNBC, CNN, W Post, NYT, are drowning in cash. The key is to keep fear levels high. Now, again, hold on. Fear levels high. Doesn't that also describe conservative outlets? The reason conservative outlets get so much fucking money and attention is because they are constantly selling you in the idea that you are just seconds away from being destroyed by Antifa or immigration or whatever. Fear is not the common talking point of the Democrats. It's of the fucking Republicans. Listen, you can criticize the Democrats, but if your criticism of the Democrats, and the Democrats exclusively, is that they keep their audience fearful, which prevents them from meaningfully understanding the importance of addressing other issues, and you're criticizing only the Democrats on this, yeah, I don't know about that. Like, the implication here being that the Republicans don't do this far, far more, it's weird to me. Like, do you actually have a problem with the fear, or do you just not like the Democrats? And this is a common trend with a lot of these types. They just fucking hate the Democrats. They despise the Democrats. Yeah, Jimmy Dore does the exact same thing, you know? Claim to be left-leaning, claim to be a progressive, but every moment they take, they'll criticize the Democrats for things the Republicans also do. And then sometimes they'll defend Republicans because those Republicans are doing things that seem like they're challenging the Democratic establishment. It's a very weird, set of patterns. Just the other day, Glenn Greenwald resigned from The Intercept. My resignation from The Intercept. Posted on his Substack, Jimmy Dore wanted to work with Nazi Mike Cernovich on ending War II. Yeah, it's just weird the types of people they tend to work with, you know? Today I sent my intention to resign from the Intercept, the news outlet I co-founded in 2013 with Jeremy Seal and Laura Poitras, as well as from its parent company, First Look Media. The final precipitating cause is that the Intercept's editors, in violation of my contractual right of editorial freedom, censored an article I wrote this week, refusing to publish it unless I removed all sections critical of Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden, the candidate vehemently supported by all New York-based Intercept editors involved in this effort at suppression. So this is very interesting to me, because it seems like what actually took place was the Intercept didn't want him publishing an article which contained unsubstantiated information on Hunter Biden. That is what the article was about. Glenn Greenwald has been frothing at the mouth about this Hunter Biden thing. And we just learned 2 days ago that all of this information on Hunter Biden actually came from a completely unverified document, which was created by a fucking computer-generated image of a person, by a non-existent human being. All this information about Hunter Biden came from a document which was authored by a literal non-existent person. Yes, really, my last video was on this. Yes, a non-existent human being, a person who doesn't exist, with a name that doesn't exist, who worked for an intelligence operation that doesn't exist. And so bad is the fact-checking surrounding this that nobody even checked up with an organization that was listed as a previous employer of this fake person. That organization never had anyone of that name work for them. Vaush, I take issue with your views on Greenwald due to the fact you're working on an American-centric standpoint. You need a more global view to understand him. No. The world does not benefit from America sliding into fascism. This is a lie that Tulcells and Jimmy Dore fans have sold with absolutely no basis. The idea that Trump or fascism would be preferable for our global relations is fucking despicable. Russia, which the Trump administration has aided and abetted with their actions, has been complicit in assisting the rise of far-right terror groups and political groups all around the world. Bolsonaro has engaged in a reign of terror on the indigenous population of Brazil. If you want to talk about the global poor, my dude, global warming is like our #1 cause we need to be fighting. Biden promises $2 trillion, Trump gives nothing. Trump defunds the EPA. The idea that the world would be better off if America just sort of languished with the Republican Party is a fucking lie. If we continue our policy of pseudo-isolationism, where we don't engage in war, but we also drone strike the fuck out of people and assist far-right dictatorships around the world and also do nothing about climate change and also pull out of the climate accords, we will create a world environment infinitely worse than one in which the Democrats continue business as usual. The myth that things can't get worse is one which Bernier Busters and Tulsi stands and all these types have been selling to you relentlessly. That we've already gotten the worst possible world now here, and that it can't possibly get worse. There's no way it can go down from here. So we might as well just work up to change. It doesn't work that way. So I reject the idea that it is an international perspective which necessarily justifies this ambivalent, this ambivalence towards Biden or Trump winning. Biden should win. Biden has to win. Glenn, apparently quite upset with the fact that the Intercept didn't want him publishing unverified, unsubstantiated information leaked under incredibly suspicious circumstances by a group of far-right politicians who got their information from a document made by a literal fake person, has resigned from The Intercept. And he claims that this is him being censored. I would say this is more an example of editorial authority. And I think the response to his resignation is, well, it sums up my thoughts pretty succinctly. Glenn Greenwald's decision to resign from The Intercept stems from a fundamental disagreement over the role of editors in the production of journalism and the nature of censorship. Glenn demands the absolute right to determine what he will publish. He believes that anyone who disagrees with him is corrupt, and anyone who presumes to edit his words is a censor. Thus, the preposterous charge that the Intercept's editors and reporters, with the lone noble exception of Glenn Greenwald, have betrayed our mission to engage in fearless investigative journalism because we have been seduced by the lure of a Joe Biden presidency. A brief glance at the stories The Intercept had published on Biden will suffice to refute these claims. Yeah, the idea that The Intercept has been uniformly positive about Joe Biden is a pretty fucking hilarious claim. That's a very difficult to substantiate claim. And you can use the language that Glenn Greenwald uses in his resignation letter does kind of underline the dishonesty behind his claims here, you know? The idea that everyone at The Intercept has fallen in line with the Democratic establishment and that everyone's trying to censor him because they don't want him to talk the truth. These conspiratorial narratives sort of belie, I would say, an anti-intellectual journalistic tendency. Yeah. I mean, this to me, I don't know. This is not acceptable behavior for somebody who considers themselves a journalist. Greenwald also completely disregards everything about Russiagate and thinks Trump has done no crimes. Yeah. That's another pattern Greenwald engages in. You know, he's one of those people on the left, people who thinks that Russiagate was just 100% made up, even though it led to dozens of credible indictments and arrests, even though there was a ton of incredibly suspicious information regarding the relationship between the Trump administration and Russian contacts, even though articles were published after the end of the actual investigation indicating that Trump had, or that the administration absolutely was at least making an effort to contact Russia about efforts to assist in their in Trump's election. Yeah, even though Rudy Giuliani is currently like compromised as a Russian info agent. Why is he so pathologically obsessed with Russiagate? It's 80% of all he talks about. Because people like Greenwald's only political principle these days is hatred of the Democratic Party. That's it. It is fear of being a liberal. That is it. That is what they care about, okay? That's it. That's it. It's that simple. A lot of quote-unquote lefties engage in this hyper-contrarianism, where information is automatically regarded as more credible if it discredits the Democratic Party, with absolutely no regard for the fact. Is he actually a socialist, though? No, he's not. To my knowledge, he is not. Does anyone know if Glenn Greenwald is a socialist? I don't think that he is. You know who isn't? Michael Tracy. But Michael Tracy also gets propped up by a lot of anti-woke far-left types, like the kind you see in Stupid Bull. Why? Because they don't like the libs. He's a socialist, but he is a socialist. He actually does believe in seizing the means of production, like the full-on socialism thing. He's like a soak-dem left populist. Listen, left populism doesn't mean anything anymore. People who support Michael Tracy call themselves left populists, okay? Does he support seizure of the means of production and the abolition of the commodity form? No. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Jesus. The narrative Glenn presents about his departure is teeming with distortions and inaccuracies, all of them designed to make him appear as a victim rather than a grown person throwing a tantrum. It would take too long to point them all out here, but we intend to correct the record in time. For now, it's important to make clear that our goal in editing his work was to ensure it would be accurate and fair. While he accuses us of political bias, it was he who was trying to recycle the dubious claims of a political campaign, the Trump campaign, and launder them as journalism. I like that phrase, launder them as journalism. We have the greatest respect for the journalist Glenn Greenwald used to be, and we remain proud of much of the work we did with him over the past 6 years. It is Glenn who has strayed from his original journalistic roots, not The Intercept. The defining feature of The Intercept's work in recent years has been the investigative journalism that came out of painstaking work by our staffers in Washington, D.C., New York, and across the rest of the country. It is the staff of The Intercept that has been carrying out our investigative mission, a mission which has involved a collaborative editing process. We have no doubt Glenn will go on to launch a new media venture where he will face no collaboration with editors. Such is the era of Substack and Patreon. In that context, it makes good business sense for Glenn to position himself as the last true guardian of investigative journalism and to smear his longtime colleagues and friends as partisan hacks. We get it. But facts are facts, and the Intercept's record of fearless, rigorous, independent journalism speaks for itself. And that is what I want to hit on more importantly than anything else. The lie that has been sold to people, the lie that has been sold to a lot of anti-establishment people, that a lack of editorial or journalistic authority is in some way liberating or good. This is a tendency that a lot of intellectual dark web types have engaged in. A tendency where they decry the authoritative bureaucratic process of submitting your work to editors, of fact-checking, and would say rather that true information, truth, actually stem, more than anything else, from a guy on a blog. Tim Pool said this as well. Tim Pool said that, you know, he doesn't fear disinfo being produced by YouTubers because at least it's not like establishment stuff. Which is bullshit to me. Absolute bullshit. When we talk about the biases of mainstream media, we're usually talking about a protracted, long-standing effort to shift the narrative on a given issue. But usually, when it comes to the factual presentation of information, mainstream news networks are more cautious than you'll ever see independent journalists being. Even Fox News didn't want to take the fucking Hunter Biden story. But Glenn Greenwald wanted to run with it. It's weird. It's really genuinely weird. I don't know much to say about it, really. I'm sure Glenn Greenwald has done a lot of good work, and that's fantastic. But to be honest, as of late, I haven't seen him really do anything that meaningfully helps the cause of the left or even the cause of anti-imperialists, which is genuinely disappointing. Wait, here's Glenn Greenwald being a TERF? Oh, no.
Dining that night. It was pretty recently, like maybe within the last year. Has a 17-year-old daughter who's dating a trans boy who's 17, who's also had various gender reassignment surgeries. And we were talking just, you know, as friends about how young people these days are who are making this choice to identify as trans and to pursue gender reassignment surgery, have permanent alterations to their body that will never be reversible, even if later on in life they decide that they had misdiagnosed themselves or been misdiagnosed. And both of them were expressing serious concerns about, as parents of teenagers, about how pervasive this was becoming and whether there was kind of something in the culture encouraging or even pressuring kids to reach these conclusions. And
now that's interesting. That sounds like an advocacy for rapid onset dysphoria, the completely unscientific term developed by a researcher in a paper that was completely discredited.
Parents to kind of push them into it for their own reasons, not anything malicious, but just kind of cultural encouragement that might be leading people to be misdiagnosed or misdiagnosing themselves. And also, secondly, the capacity of someone at the age of 14 or 15 to make decisions about their lives of that magnitude that would be irreversible, biologically or anatomically irreversible. And it was a really interesting conversation. We talked about, we explored the issue. It was, you know, a really interesting discussion. We probably talked about 45 minutes or an hour. I got back to Brazil and I realized that discussion that we had, they would never, ever in a million years in their column, on a podcast, on their show, admit to having those thoughts. They would never be willing to explore publicly those questions that we were all raising with one another and thinking about in a really interesting way, because they're petrified of being scorned for it. Or
this is it. This is the fucking heart of the intellectual dark web right here, saying stupid shit and then loudly pontificating about how the reason why nobody's said it before is because of how censor heavy everybody is. You talked about this on Joe Rogan, the largest podcast in the country? You have millions of Twitter followers. This is the heart of the tendency here. Why are people scorning me when I say dumb shit? Well, it must be because I'm a truth teller, and nobody else can actually handle the truth that I am telling. Nobody can actually fathom the ideas that I'm sharing. It must be everybody else. But this is they do this all the time. This is the tendency. Man, I don't know. He does the anti-woke thing, and he himself is gay and married. Well, you can be a gay. I mean, Dave Rubin does the same shit. He's gay. Yeah, it betrays a certain skull shape. He looks like Maupin. He actually does look like Caleb Maupin, doesn't he? Did you know there are extensive psychological tests to see if you're truly trans, not just think you are? Yeah, no shit. You think they give fucking puberty blockers and hormones to just any fucking kid who walks up? Jesus Christ. Emails with Intercept editors showing censorship of my Joe Biden interview. Here we go. Dude, who emails this much? What the fuck? Glenn, I have carefully read your draft, and there's some I agree with and some I disagree with, but am comfortable publishing. However, there is some material at the core of this draft that I think is very flawed. Overall, I think this piece can work best if it is significantly narrowed down to what you first discussed with Betsy. Media criticism about liberal journalists not asking Biden the questions he should be asked more forcefully, and why they are failing to do this. Betsy agrees with me that the draft's core problem is the connection it often asserts or assumes between the Hunter Biden emails and corruption by Joe Biden. You know, the thing that has not been proven at any point. Keep in mind that in the original Why I Left the Intercept article that Glenn Greenwald published, the headline was literally just, they censored me because they wanted me to remove everything critical about Joe Biden. But then it turns out they just want you to remove information which is unverified, which connects Hunter Biden emails to corruption on the part of Joe Biden. But then he went ahead and said that was some kind of broader political partisan censorship. There are many places in which the explicit or implied position is A, the emails expose corruption by Joe Biden, and B, news organizations are suppressing their reporting on it. These positions strike me as foundations of this draft. They also strike me as inaccurate, and that inaccuracy undercuts narrower points that are sound. This is exactly what I mean, dude. Glenn Greenwald's like, oh, they censored me because I criticized Biden. And what it actually is they just didn't want to publish unverified lies that had been laundered by the Republican Party and turned to come from a source that is so bad that it came from a non-existent person. Literally just a disinfo campaign that he wanted to publish as sound journalism. There are a couple published emails and texts in which Hunter Biden or his business partners suggest or hint Joe Biden might be aware of or involved in their dealings with China. Those passages have gotten the most attention justifiably, but they are vague. In one of the China emails, for instance, there is reference to the big guy, who might be Joe Biden or might be somebody else. Remember Trump during the debates? He said, they say there's a big guy. Maybe you're the big guy. I don't know. Remember that? And it's unclear whether Joe Biden, even if he is the big guy, was aware of an ownership share being discussed for him. Some of the most serious accusations and potential corroboration come not from the hard drive, but from Tony Bobulinski's short press conference in which he didn't take questions before he turned up at the debate as Trump's guest. Literally, Glenn Greenwald treating as journalism something just said by a Trump supporter. Like, that's it, you know? As the Wall Street Journal news story on this matter reflected, it is newsworthy that somebody has come forward alleging that Joe Biden was involved in Hunter's China dealings and that Joe may have met some of Hunter's business partners. But it's very significant that the Journal found no corroborating evidence either of Joe Biden's involvement or any such details, or those deals being consummated. These are major issues which I feel undermine the draft's thesis and are downplayed in the draft. In addition, there are substantive problems with the way you present the information on Ukraine. As your draft notes at one point, it is true that no evidence, including these new emails, constitute proof that Biden's motivation in demanding Ashokan's termination was to benefit Burisma. However, there are many places in the piece where you say the material raises serious question about Biden's motives, yet you never present any evidence that supports these questions. This is IDW bullshit, guys. This is what I mean. This is exactly what I mean. Glenn Greenwald has absolutely no basis to claim he was being censored by a partisan editorial committee. He just wanted to lie, provide no evidence, and launder it as journalism. A connected problem is that your draft asserts there is a massive suppression effort by the entire major media to not report these accusations, but then doesn't explore how major news organizations have done significant stories, and those stories, such as the journals, have not found anything significant. It's true, the major claims from the whole Hunter Biden laptop thing have not been corroborated. We have a few pictures, we have a few emails. There's no denying that Hunter Biden used his name to get ahead. There's no denying that, but there is no evidence to indicate that Joe Biden was getting anything from these, or that Joe Biden was in any way setting up or arranging these meetings. Yeah, even Fox News wouldn't cover this. Greenwald speaking to Tucker Carlson about all this.
Greenwald
Give it to me. Give it to me. Give it to me, Glenn. Oh, give it to me.
About that question. Greenwald is a traditional leftist. He's committed above all to forcing transparency on people who hold power. Years ago, Greenwald co-founded a news site called The Intercept. Today, he resigned. In a statement, Greenwald explained why. Quote, "The Intercept's editors, in violation of my contractual right of editorial freedom, censored an article I wrote this week, refusing to publish it unless I removed all sections critical of Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden."
Not true. Again, a complete lie. The emails make it very clear the only things they wanted removed were unverified or unsubstantiated claims about the relationship between Joe Biden and Hunter Biden, based off of non-existent evidence that was laundered by the Republican Party. The idea that this is a partisan effort to avoid criticizing Joe Biden from the fucking Intercept is not true.
The candidate vehemently supported by all New York-based Intercept editors involved in this effort at suppression. And he went on. Greenwald's full statement is up tonight at an internet platform called Substack, which is not yet censored. No matter who you plan to vote for next week, we recommend that you read it. Glenn Greenwald joins us tonight. Glenn, thanks so much for coming on. The idea of you resigning from a news organization you helped found is stunning. Tell us why you did.
Well, the news organization that I co-created was in 2013 at the height of the Snowden reporting. I left The Guardian to do it because I was seeing that there were a lot of constraints imposed on journalism and our ability to report freely against governments, against power centers, against all kinds of institutions that wield authority.
By the way, this I think is totally valid. When he initially founded The Intercept, it seemed like his interest was mostly on challenging state power by reporting on information that other journalists didn't want to touch. But remember, that is only valid if the information you want to publish and talk about is true. That's the condition there. It doesn't work if you just want to, regurgitate partisan disinfo against the candidate you have a grudge against. That doesn't work. It only works if you're actually speaking truth to power. Not just speaking to power, truth to power.
Authority and the premise of the news outlet, the core overarching premise, the reason it was created was to ensure that journalists would always have complete journalistic independence and editorial freedom, never have to pull punches journalistically or pay homage to pieties because of the preferences, the partisan or ideological preferences of editors or of anybody else. That was the core founding idea and vision.
But The Intercept does have editors. So, folks, what do editors do if they're not censoring or controlling in a partisan way the release of information? What do? I see it in chat. Come on. You guys know this. They edit. Yes, they edit. And one of the things they do while editing is fact checking. There is nothing wrong with wanting a media outlet which is free from partisan disinfo. But the goal there then is if you, Glenn Greenwald, start producing partisan disinfo, that they should be editing that out too. Fact checking is important. It's an important component of journalism. And you wanted to say things that just aren't verified. You wanted to vilify Joe Biden for information that is being distributed along an incredibly distrustful network of far-right news sources being regurgitated by people who, listen, guys, Tucker Carlson is no longer reporting on Hunter Biden after the NBC leak, which indicated that all this information came from a fucking AI-generated profile picture. That it wasn't even tied to a real person. Tucker Carlson is no longer reporting on it now that it's been discredited even further. But he'll still have Glenn Greenwald on over here. He'll still have Glenn Greenwald all right here.
And then that is what makes it so amazing that at the very outlet that I co-created, that was built on my reputation, my credibility, my journalistic accomplishments, then tried to intervene to censor me 6 days before an election because I wanted to publish reporting and analysis about the evidence that raises serious questions about the conduct of the candidate that all of the editors at that outlet vehemently and enthusiastically support.
Except you didn't provide evidence, did you? That's the whole point. You didn't provide evidence. That was the claim here, that you would just make claims. Do you think journalists can't report on unconfirmed information? Of course they can. Journalists can absolutely report on unconfirmed information. But there is a difference between reporting on unconfirmed information and just stating it as a fact. If you want to report on unconfirmed information, you would make an article like allegations about Joe Biden through Hunter Biden laptop, or documents raise concerns, are discredited. That's the thing. If you're reporting on information that isn't verified and that non-verified info is coming from an incredibly discredited source, you have to say that too. Like otherwise, like you could just make up anything, The complete lack of journalistic standards. You can just launder any information as true. Easily. You can just like, reports say that actually Joe Biden eats the blood of children and uses their adrenochrome and there are reports on that, and injects their adrenochrome into his body in order to give him the energy necessary to debate Donald Trump. Reports say that, within his body is a massive congealed child blood mutating into an antichrist that will soon gestate and form a womb of the undead world that will consume us all, and we will live forever in an eternal hell. You can say anything, but if the information isn't credible, you have to say that. Fox News loves to do this. Yeah, they say, some people say. Have you ever watched Fox News? How many times do they say, some people say? How many times have you seen them say that? They say this shit all the time. When they say that, it means what they're saying is complete bullshit. 100% bullshit. They're just lying. They're making it up. Actual journalists, if they have evidence, provide that evidence. Some people say is just a fucking, you are broadcasting to the world that you have no fucking idea what you're talking about.
I would imagine that some of our viewers don't read The Intercept.
Wait, I'm sorry. How are journalists supposed to report on unconfirmed information then, given it could always potentially be a lie? Say it's discredited. This isn't just unconfirmed information. This isn't just any alleged information. This is alleged information which came from a far-right partisan source working off an incredibly suspicious info leak, which was derived from a source that said, a source that has been found to not even be a real human being who claimed to work at an intelligence organization that doesn't actually exist. You don't just say it's unconfirmed. All information is unconfirmed. You can't fucking prove a negative. You have to be open with the legitimacy of the information.
Live outside our country, which is one of the reasons I think you say what you think is true. Tell us what this portends for the future here in the United States.
So The Intercept was actually, for a while, a unique publication, and I think the vision I just described is one reason, but another was that it was intended, above all else, to be highly skeptical of the claims of intelligence agencies. At the time when we were doing the reporting, the attacks were coming from the NSA, the CIA, the deep state against me, against my source, Edward Snowden.
The deep state. Here's another quick thing. If anybody uses the term deep state, they're not a fucking leftist, okay? If you're a leftist, you know what the deep state is, okay? It's the bourgeois. right-leaning people call it the deep state because it's an ambiguous term that allows you to project whatever conspiracy theory you want onto it. Marxists have this easy. What is the deep state? The deep state is a set of collected interests of autocrats, bankers, and the wealthy who work together to suppress the class interest of the proletariat, okay? But the term deep state, when used that broadly, is nothing more than a dog whistle for far-right groups to fill in whatever group they hate into it, okay? I've literally heard you use the term deep state, though. I usually use deep state while putting up finger quotes. If I haven't, then I apologize. The deep state, when used by Republicans, this is a dog whistle, okay? They mean Democrat elites. They usually also mean pedophiles, okay?
In against the reporting, and we knew they were lying constantly and disseminating propaganda in a very powerful way. So we set out to say, we're going to investigate them. We're going to be skeptical of them. We're going to subject their assertions to critical scrutiny.
Whoops.
And
right.
I am so embarrassed and angered that the media outlet that I created, along with two other excellent journalists, to do that, the only article it published about all of these documents that have emerged about Joe Biden, other than a column of mine where I denounced Facebook and Twitter for censoring it, was an article that made reference in passing to those documents very snidely and dismissively to say that no one should pay attention to it because it was Russian disinformation, and it cited a letter from John Brennan, James Clapper, Mike Hayden, and the rest of the goons from the CIA and the intelligence community asserting it. And worse still, that letter said, we have no evidence that Russia's involved in any of this. The Intercept omitted that phrase, simply cited that letter to try and encourage people to ignore this evidence on the grounds that Russia had manufactured it and that the evidence was fabricated, even though there's never been any evidence for that's been true, and everything since has disproven it, showing Russia was not involved in any of this, and nobody, certainly not even Joe Biden, disputes that these emails and other text messages are completely real and authentic.
So, again, the source for all of this has been completely discredited. I know that Glenn Greenwald is completely Russiagate addled, and like he's still like traumatized from the legacy, the fucking shockwave of Russiagate, but the whole degree to which Russia is directly involved thing is not the only metric by which you determine the credibility of a story at all, as a matter of fact. Yeah, here is Naomi Klein. I'm grateful to Glenn for helping to found such an important media outlet. The Intercept is run by editors who give us all exceptional freedom to write and speak while also telling us when we are losing the plot. It's an honor to work with them. Become a member today. Glenn was not censored. He was edited, and edited well. Crying censorship is a marketing ploy to gin up subscribers for his new Substack. Are people really going to fall for it? Same fucking grift the rest of them do. Same grift that Ben Shapiro's done. Same grift that all the alt-right types have done. Same grift that Dave Rubin has done. The exact same fucking grift. You cry censorship when in reality you're just being held accountable for the things that you say, and you use it to get dipshits who just like the idea of being sort of performatively anti-establishment to come and join you. And that's it. It's that simple.
It's horrifying. So what you're watching is agencies of the U.S. government turning their awesome and unconstrained powers against the American population.
This is the real story of the last 4 years of the Trump administration, which is that for a long time on the left, there was a healthy skepticism of the CIA.
Yes, there was.
There was a lot of anti-war activism in the Bush and Cheney years. That has all disappeared. And the reason it's disappeared is because the CIA, from the very first days of the Trump administration, even before he was inaugurated, devoted themselves to sabotaging the administration because Donald Trump...
These are literally Republican talking points. The intelligence community has dedicated themselves to sabotaging Trump's presidency. What the fuck are you talking about? And now the left is pro-CIA? What the fuck are you talking about?
Trump questioned just a few of their pieties, and that can't be done in Washington. Whoever does that must be destroyed. And so the CIA...
He didn't question their pieties. The thing we're referring to here is the intelligence communities giving Trump information on disinfo attempts from foreign governments, and Trump not listening to them because he trusted Putin more. But Glenn Greenwald is allergic to the idea that Russia can do bad things because that's too liberal for him. So now he's going to, rather than accept the simple fact that the intelligence community is merely trying to do their job, by informing the president of threats to the country. That is their job, after all. That's the reason why the intelligence communities hate us so much, because they consider us a threat to this country as well. They aren't just like cackling supervillains. They have a very specific agenda, and they do what they can to try to operate on it. It's that simple. Their agenda isn't pro-us. Their agenda is pro-America. Are you defending the intelligence communities? That's the third stupid message that I've seen from you. You should understand what your enemies are and what they do. The intelligence communities are designed to operate under any presidency. They're designed to protect the invested interests of this country. That often means that they'll attack people like us because we are enemies of the state, because we are not capitalists. It's that simple. But don't pretend that the intelligence communities are going after Trump because he challenged their hegemony. Do you have any fucking idea how insane that is? This sounds like a QAnon conspiracy theory. That the CIA and FBI have it out for Donald Trump because he's challenging the deep state? He might as well be like promoting QAnon. How fucking lost do you have to be, Glenn Greenwald, to unironically believe that Donald Trump is anti-establishment? The fucking East Coast entrenched billionaire born with a fucking platinum spoon in his mouth who has done nothing but jump from failed ship to failed ship to failed ship, grifting his way into the presidency, where he has since done nothing but challenge the efforts of worker organization, consolidated wealth and power in the hands of the wealthy, and then used the executive's branch unilateral power to cheapen democracy and to threaten the opponents of his administration. Okay? He literally lives in a fucking golden tower, okay? Glenn Greenwald is so fucking lost, dude. He is completely lost. It is insane. If you actually think that Trump is a fucking anti-establishment intelligence agency, I don't know. That's insane to me.
CIA and the deep state operatives became heroes of the liberal left, the people who support the Democratic Party. They're now in a full union with the neocons, the Bush-Cheney operatives, the CIA, Silicon Valley, and Wall Street. That is the union of power.
Yes, the left is now aligned with Silicon Valley and Wall Street. Yeah, Wall Street hates Donald Trump, dude. Yeah, the left and neocons. This is insane. Listen to him. He actually thinks Trump is an anti-establishment, anti-deep state person who's being attacked by the left because the left can't handle how anti-establishment he is. He's a fucking idiot. He has lost the plot completely. This is Jimmy Dore tier shit.
Along with mainstream media outlets that are fully behind the Democratic Party, which is likely to at least take over one branch of government, if not all of them, in the coming election. And that is a very alarming proposition because they're authoritarian, they believe in censorship, and they believe in suppression of information.
And the Republicans don't? The Republicans, literally, this just popped up on my feed. Texas Republicans have asked a federal judge to throw out 100,000 ballots in Harris County cast through curbside voting. They drew Judge Andrew Hannon, one of the most notoriously partisan Republican judges of the entire federal judiciary. This is alarming. Trump is constantly undermining the election. He's asked for there to be poll watchers. He said the election should end on November 3rd, even though elections end when all the fucking votes are counted. The idea that you can go on the show of Tucker Carlson and claim the Democrats are the ones who are authoritarian and anti-democracy, this is insane. Whatever good Glenn Greenwald has done in the past is utterly irrelevant now. He has completely lost himself.
That exposes them in any kind of a critical light.
For a U.S. government agency to try and disseminate propaganda within the United States, I mean, is there any clearer attack on democracy than that?
You mean like the Republican Party, which has literally been taking Russian disinfo and propagating it to the masses? Or the Republican Party who lied about COVID-19 and 250,000 people are dead because of it? Or the Republican Party, which is actively engaging in a disinfo effort to try to convince Americans that democracy will die if they allow votes to be counted past November 3rd? The idea that Glenn Greenwald is indistinguishable from like a Jimmy Dore or Michael Tracy type. I have no respect for this man. Yeah, it is the hallmark of the intellectual dark web to believe that college campus people with blue hair are more dangerous than right-wing authoritarianism. The anti-woke shit being more of a motivator than like legitimate anti-fascism.
So when we were doing the Snowden reporting, one of the things that induced Edward Snowden to come forward as someone who had worked in the CIA and the NSA was his anger and horror that the tools of the NSA had been turned on the American people. They're supposed to spy on foreign adversary governments, but they weren't. They were collecting our phone records. Same with the CIA. They're trained disinformation agents. That's what they do. They lie for a living. But they're supposed to do that in other countries where we want to induce some sort of change, overthrow a government, topple a regime, whatever quote-unquote interference the U.S. government wants to do, the way we're also upset that Russia did in 2016. That's what they're trained to do. The law, though, and the obvious foundation...
Wait, no. What? They don't lie for a living. They just do anything in their power to support the interests of the state. Of course intelligence agencies have been used against their own people. They have been for fucking decades. What does this have to do with the claim that Trump is fighting them in some sort of anti-deep state war?
Prohibition on having a security state, a national security state after World War II, was it was never supposed to be turned domestically. They weren't supposed to be involved in our politics or disseminating propaganda. Go turn on any of those other cable networks or pick up the op-ed page of any of the biggest newspapers, and all you'll see are ex-members of the CIA, the DOJ, the FBI, the NSA telling Americans what they ought to believe. They've infiltrated the means of communication domestically. They do it through leaks. They do it through clandestine operations and through lies. They propagandize.
What is this conspiracy shit right now? If there are former intelligence operatives who have an opinion they want to share with the people, then that's their right. You would have to assess the legitimacy of their claims on a case-by-case basis. For example, if you were of the opinion that the Trump administration is a massive fucking national security threat because they're in bed with foreign authoritarians and their individual members are constantly at risk of being subverted by Russian disinfo attempts, an intelligence agency would be concerned about that. The only person here who's pushing a narrative without evidence is Glenn Greenwald. This guy has a massively positive background. Let the situation play out for a couple of days before you conclude all his contributions are now irrelevant. No. His contributions are now irrelevant to what he's doing now. I'm sorry, dude. When you go on Tucker Carlson's show and then you start talking about how Donald Trump is fighting a war against the deep state and how the Democrats have fallen in line with all the enemies of America for authoritarianism, you are no longer in a position where you can claim that you are doing anything good for the left. There isn't like a coming back from this. This is insane. This is completely unhinged. He went on the fucking Rising as well, the complete grift circuit, all the bitch and moan about how he was edited because he wasn't allowed to put disinfo propaganda into a legitimate news organization. The whole goddamn grift.
A media friend of the show, Glenn Greenwald, co-founder of The Intercept, resigned from that publication yesterday, citing censorship of an article that he wrote on Hunter Biden and Joe Biden as his primary motivation.
And Glenn joins us now to tell us more about what went down. Great to see you, Glenn.
Good to see you, Glenn.
Good to
Hey,
be
Glenn.
guys.
Can you just take people through sort of step by step what happened here? And also, was this over just this one article about Hunter Biden, or was this kind of a broader schism that's been brewing for some time?
It's definitely part of a broader schism that's been brewing for some time, although even in the absence of that, even if things had been perfect, I would never accept somebody telling me that I can't publish my views or perspectives without having other people first agree with what it is.
That is how editors work. That is indeed how the editorial process functions. That is true.
Is that I'm saying. So even if everything had been perfect, I think this probably would have happened anyway. But no, as I detailed, I had a growing dissatisfaction with the direction of The Intercept. And a lot of this, I think people have to understand is the way that I've always written is based in how I began writing, which is I didn't go to Columbia Journalism School and then try and get a job at the New York Times. I opened a blog for free in 2005 and just began expressing my views about what I was seeing in the Bush administration, the war on terror.
Yep, you used to be good, we know.
And then I would have editorial freedom where I post directly to the internet without editorial intervention, except in rare cases like the Snowden case or the Brazil reporting, or where it could give rise to legal liability. Media outlet, when I created The Intercept, in order to impose greater limits on.
Oh, by the way, You know what I learned recently? Remember how weird it was that Twitter was censoring everybody who posted the New York Post article, the Hunter Biden article initially? Turns out that wasn't actually censorship. Twitter has a policy where you cannot post leaks. You can't post like leaked information, like stuff like that, you know? They did the exact same thing with a collection of leaks about the police that took place just a couple of months ago. Did you know that? It wasn't some weird specific defense of Joe Biden. It was a pre-existing policy that has been used in the past against the left.
On my own freedom. Nobody would do that, and I didn't either. So I've always had that freedom.
Were the tax returns not leaked? Nope. The article on the tax returns didn't show the tax returns themselves, only information on the tax returns. If the article on the tax returns had literal like copies of his fucking 1040 or whatever, then it would have been censored just the same.
To publish directly to the internet without anyone intervening, which is why I've been able over the last 4 years to be able, for example, to publish so much skepticism about Russiagate when it was horrifying my colleagues at the Intercept who were on board with Russiagate and knew that it was making their liberal friends actually go and write your own article. And
that's great. There we go.
Russiagate, and knew that it was making their liberal friends angry. It was only because I had that right.
There we go. That's the motivation right there. The underlying motivation.
So that right is sacrificing it. But the reality is that the reason they didn't want to do that is because in 2016, The Intercept was one of those publications, like the New York Times, that was blamed for Trump's winning because we did do a lot of reporting on the Hillary emails because that was our job as reporters. And they didn't want to spend the next 4 years, if Trump won, having their friends say, oh, look, you did it again. You published an article about Joe Biden before the election. Or even if Trump lost, saying, oh, look, you were trying to help Trump. That's the reality. They were captive to fears about what people on Twitter would say.
Except, nope. That is a completely dishonest inference from the evidence provided. We have the emails. You literally published the emails. It just said that you were publishing lies, and that's it. It's that simple. Wait, hold on. Vaush, I love you, dude, but you're not being very base right now. CIA/NSA isn't good, dog. Well, hold on. Wait, I'm sorry. I don't know what like the collective IQ of my audience is. I can see that the Glenn Greenwald fans share his IQ. When have I said the CIA or NSA is good? Can you find a single clip at any point during this stream where I've even inferred that? Can you find any point? This is what people who like Glenn Greenwald or Michael Tracy or whatever these types will do. Well, they'll be like, oh, you think that Trump isn't attacking the deep state? The Trump victory isn't good because he's anti-establishment? What, are you pro-establishment? No, I challenge the premise. The intelligence agencies only provide information contrary to the Trump administration's will because the Trump administration is bad for America, like the country of America.
What their friends and colleagues would say, and they just didn't want me reporting anything that would reflect on negatively on Joe Biden for that.
Vaush, I think you're misunderstanding Glenn's point. He's implying the Democrats are taking the unreliable intelligence agencies' reports too seriously, not questioning their reliability. Whoa, hold on. So Glenn Greenwald thinks reports from the FBI are uncredible, but he is okay taking reports from disinfo pushed by the Trump administration that ended up coming from leaks that came from non-existent people? That's the standard of credibility that he's applying right here? Why is chat being so dumb? Because people have a reflexive defense of things they think are anti-establishment. That's the problem. And that's always been a problem with the left. Anti-establishment doesn't mean shit if the alternative to the establishment is worse. Is Trump anti-establishment in some senses? Yeah, he's anti-establishment in the sense that I think that he would probably be okay with America being fucking destroyed if he thought that he could get away with it and make a lot of money and be very popular for it. There are previous presidents, like Ronald Reagan, are also fucking monsters, but I have a feeling that in addition to them being monsters, they're probably okay with keeping the institution of the United States of America nice and functioning. I don't get that feeling from Trump. Now, whether or not you like the idea of America continuing to exist, the world would not be made better by the perpetuation of a far-right regime, operating with other far-right regimes, completely ignoring all information to the contrary of the interests of those far-right regimes, ignoring climate change, and plunging the entire planet into a fucking +3 degrees Celsius nightmare world until we inevitably kill ourselves fighting over resource wars, as half the fucking planet has to migrate from flooded coastal communities and from desertification into the to the fucking cities that are past the coastline. Okay? That is not an improvement on the state of the world. That doesn't improve the world that we live in right now.
Reason.
So, Glenn, The Intercept responded to you yesterday. I'll just read a part of what they say. They say the narrative Glenn presents about his departure is teeming with distortion and inaccuracies, all of them designed to make him appear as a victim rather than a grown person throwing a tantrum. You published your email correspondence yesterday with those editors over the said censorship of your article there. Could you just lay out the actual accuracies here about and address their response?
Sure. I mean, look, in order to explain to the public, including my own readership, why I was leaving the media outlet I created with great fanfare, I obviously had to be honest about my dissatisfactions with it. So I understand that the people who are still at The Intercept need to defend themselves, which means
that's not an answer to the question.
Attacking me, and that's fine. But this is not a case where anyone needs to figure out who's telling the truth. I said from the beginning I was going to publish all of the information in the name of transparency that The Intercept has often failed to provide for itself, most notoriously in the Reality Winner case, where to this very day it never has explained to the public why that happened, how it happened, who did that. And I was furious about that. That was one of the major fights I had with them. And so I didn't want to be that way. So I published the correspondence, all of it I had with my editors surrounding their attempt to censor my article. And it was very clear what they said, which is, we're not going to let you publish this unless you remove all of the sections that talk about Joe Biden and Ukraine and Burisma and Joe Biden and China, and instead just make it a very narrow, much more stripped down version of this article by talking about your media criticisms. And
Nope. Again, he's literally relying on the people who are listening not actually reading the emails that he himself published. He published these so he couldn't be accused of being dishonest or like obfuscating information. But the emails very clearly say, you shouldn't publish this because this is unverified information that cheapens the legitimacy of the points you're trying to make. It's that simple. But he's still saying, even with that information out there, that they just wanted to censor him because he was criticizing Joe Biden. Hot take, CNN journalists are better than Glenn. In this respect, yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry, being anti-establishment doesn't inherently make you good. Being willing to call out intelligence agencies doesn't make you good if you're doing it to defend the Republican Party. Being willing to call out mainstream media bias doesn't on its own mean you're being good if you're doing it to excuse the illegitimacy of the arguments you're making. Like, again, this is how these people get away with their grift. They'll signal to something good, but the good is something they're using as a shield in order to defend a bad point. Vaush's argument is that Republicans are bad, basically. Yeah, of course. Yeah, obviously. Oh, yeah, wait, do you think that's a gotcha? Yeah, of course. The Republicans are a fucking fascist government. We are as close as we have ever been to the destruction of this country. With regards to the destruction of democracy, of the adherence to the bourgeois electoralism that socialists need in order to prevail. Yeah, Republicans are bad. The same way QAnon uses anti-pedophilia as a shield, people like Glenn Greenwald are using anti-establishment vigor as a shield for his dishonesty.
I said, look, if there's a factual inaccuracy in the article, of course you should. I want you to identify that, but you haven't. But I'm not going to take out the parts that are critical of Joe Biden and just make it a media critique.
They didn't ask you to take out all criticisms of Biden.
In principle, that's wrong, but also because the media critique that they didn't pursue this story aggressively enough makes no sense unless you explain why there's an important story.
Oh no, he got desynced from the audio
here in the first place. And you can just see in the emails that was what they were saying. We're not going to publish this unless the sections about Biden are removed.
Nope. It literally said first thing in the email, not that.
So let me ask you this, Glenn, and I speak sort of candidly. Like, I think a lot of people on the left weren't sure how to handle this yesterday for a couple of reasons. Number one, because so many of us had such great, incredible respect for you, but also maybe because the bar has been so lowered. The Intercept has been one of the only left-leaning outlets or independent outlets or sort of mainstream outlets that has covered Biden critically at all. Ryan Grimm obviously broke the initial story about Tara Reade's allegations being suppressed by the Time's Up organization. There's been other critical reporting of Democrats, the uncovering of the Alex.
By the way, that's also not true. With regards to the Tara Reade and Time's Up, the reason Time's Up didn't want to get behind that is because they had questions on the credibility of the Tara Reade accusations. It wasn't suppression. They used terms like suppression and censorship in place of like authorial or critical examination. They literally do think that fact-checking is censorship. That's a very common talking point amongst Republicans and their enablers on the left.
Morse smear campaign that went down. So it's sort of like, you know, we see at least some.
We believe all victims accept Tara Reade. Wait, are you like a conservative? Wait, Dutch Master, are you like on the right or something? Nobody has ever actually said they believe all victims. Like, nobody has ever actually said that. Like, at any point. This sounds like a Republican like, believe all women until this. Well, no.
Critical and honest reporting coming out there. Can you speak to that part? And then also the other piece that's...
Oh, wait, hold on. Being raped by a woman babysitter, oh no, what a tragedy, is a thing Dutch Master said. Oh, hold on. We have a pedophile in chat. Now I see. It's all coming together. Yep. There we go. Being raped by a woman babysitter, oh no, what a tragedy. Open borders, less sex trafficking, nice logic. Hey, Dutch Master, do you want to hop on Discord? You have a lot of phenomenal takes. I'd love to talk with you. You seem like a very intelligent and composed individual. It's that or a perma. This Glenn Greenwald segment is too disorganized for me to upload anyway. We're going to cut it off. We might as well cut it off with something good.